Joining me on Impact Catalyst is the president and CEO of the Florida Philanthropic Network, Ashley Dietz. Welcome.
Thank you for having me, Joe.
So we're both in the information and idea dissemination business, which I think is awesome. It's such a service to our local nonprofits, and you've been doing it or the organization is doing it in a formalized and effective manner for a number of years. So we can get on the same page, talk a little bit about the network.
Sure. So the Florida Philanthropic Network is a network of funders across the state of Florida. We have 90 organization-wide members, and our mission is to build philanthropy for a better Florida. Our members range from community foundations, private foundations, corporate foundations, and grant makers. We have some national funders that are members, some statewide funders, but the vast majority of our funders are actually funding in localities or across regions. So here in the Tampa Bay and St. Pete area, we have members like the Foundation for a Healthy St. Petersburg as a member of FPN, as well as Community Foundation of Tampa Bay, Helios Education Foundation, Pinellas Education Foundation, for example. And our members represent about $7 billion in assets and give out about $500 million annually to invest back into Florida to our Florida nonprofits.
That's great. So as an informational glue between these organizations, can you kind of break down the types of content that are the most common that you're sharing?
Sure. So really the kind of three key things that we do as a network or an association of funders is we convene, partner, and advocate on behalf of the philanthropic sector. I would say probably the two most engaged areas that we kind of focus on through our affinity groups is around education and health. It's really, really important to our members that we focus in on our policy and advocacy efforts in that space in Tallahassee as well as federally. But that is probably our two most focused areas and where our funders are focusing the most across the state.
Got it. And then how are those positions developed, with such a wide constituency? Do your members come to you with what they want to dig into? And then sort of what's your filtering process to figure out where you devote your resources?
Sure. So a lot of our members are already funding and being really intentional in those spaces. So we really lean on their levels of expertise and where they're seeing the need is across their regions or across the state. So for example, for the Foundation for Healthy St. Pete, they have a real focus on, health equity, and we really lean into them to see what they're doing in terms of best practice so we can share that out to other funders who maybe are interested in doing similar work. So really it's bubbled up from our membership. So it's pretty authentic in the way that we do our work and really deciding on what the positions that we take on as an organization around education and health, and really indicative of what's happening, in our regions and in our communities.
Interesting. And obviously there are many perspectives on many issues. So when you look at your sort of intra-membership communication, as these ideas and positions are starting to formulate, how does that process usually go? How often are you communicating with your members? And then what's sort of the cross-pollination of position development?
Sure. So we, again, our mission as an organization is to build philanthropy for a better Florida. So of course, our members and funders are funding a broad swath of focus areas across, our communities here in Florida. But for us, one of our values is around courage, to be bold and speak with conviction on issues that are important to the philanthropic sector and the systems that it supports. So oftentimes we really kind of look at that to see what's happening across our counties, across the state. That's most important for us to lean into from a policy position perspective. And then again, really leaning into what our members are saying to make sure that whatever we advocate on behalf of is, going to be best served for our communities and obviously make the most traction so we can hopefully, sway legislators and sway others to really invest properly in the areas that need to be addressed, across our communities.
And as we kind of break down the need for advocacy, obviously there's very few people that don't want the core missions of these nonprofits to happen and they want them to be successful. So then as you're sort of positioning certain topics or whatever, what's the most common kind of pushback or what's the most common hurdle that you have to overcome? Is it just competition for resources in general, or are there misconceptions? So what's sort of your bigger hurdles typically?
Sure. So we are a 501c3 organization ourselves, FPN is, and so we're nonpartisan in our approach to policy and advocacy efforts. I think more often than not, it's less about pushback and more about information. How can we be a resource to those in Tallahassee and to other funders and to nonprofits about what's actually happening in these spaces, making sure that we're utilizing data and best practices and not just using opinion on kind of what our positions are. So we do lean heavily in on the data to make sure that when we're showing or addressing gaps, in education funding or in health, for example, that it is driven by the data that we are collecting and receiving, as well as utilizing national research from other pretty significantly large funders to make sure that our members are well informed on best practices and what's happening in the space, so they can make their investments accordingly. So I don't think we really have pushback so much from legislators. It's more like, what information can we provide them to help them do their jobs better?
Got it. So to sort of articulate that, or to drill down on it, can you share an effort that you made last year that had a positive outcome to just kind of illustrate the process?
Sure. So I'll focus on one around 2020. We were spearheading an initiative with other funders around the 2020 census and why that was so important. I think there's a misconception that what the 2020 census is really all about. And really, it's an economic issue about making sure that federal dollars are distributed to Florida correctly and that we get the count correct, because that's real money on the table that we want to make sure Floridians have access to. And so I think once we kind of explained it in that way, we actually did a pooled fund with other funders across the state of Florida and some national funders to support grassroots initiatives to make sure that we didn't have an undercount. I'm really talking about the economic benefits to making sure, folks knew how they could be counted for the census, what that means. We actually had a 1% uptick from the last, from 10 years ago in our census because of this effort, which is great, which is real dollars back to Florida. So we always try to make sure that we're collaborative in our approach to kind of some of these advocacy and policy specific issues or around civic engagement. But that was really, really successful. And, we will continue to try to maintain our legacy around the census, even though it happens every 10 years. The American Community Survey happens every year, and that's really critically important, just to make sure, the voices of Floridians are heard.
That's great. And as we sort of turn your services back onto the nonprofits themselves, can you talk about the value of the communication channels that you provide, and then how you're bringing thought leadership back to help the nonprofits accomplish their missions more effectively?
Sure. So I've been a funder in philanthropy for 13 years. So prior to my role here, I was a grant maker. So I know the importance and the role of nonprofit communities and the communities that they serve, but more importantly, the capacity issues that a lot of nonprofits, including myself, face. I wear multiple hats for a small but mighty team here at FPN. So it's important that we work alongside other organizations like ourselves who also serve nonprofits. So the Florida Nonprofit Alliance, they're based out of Jacksonville, but serve the entire state. We're members as well, but a lot of nonprofits that our funders, obviously support are also members of FNA, and making sure that we have a great feedback loop between funders and with nonprofit organizations, not just feedback to funders directly on how they're doing their work, but also feedback to understand how is work being implemented, locally, what's working, what isn't working, so funders can better understand the nature of the hurdles and, barriers that our nonprofits face. So I definitely can relate, because I used to be a funder and now I work with funders, but I myself am part of a nonprofit organization and understand some of those difficulties that we can face. But, at the end of the day, we are in this line of work because we want our communities to prosper and thrive, right? And we want to be part of the solutions to issues. And so it's a real honor to be part of the nonprofit kind of networking community. And hopefully FPN can continue to be strategic and help make it, easier and more effective for nonprofits to do their work.
That's great. And our audience, as I mentioned before we started recording, is largely a lot of nonprofits watch Impact Catalyst. So what's the right type of organization to join the Philanthropic Network?
Sure. So to be a member of FPN, you have to be a 501c3 funder for a foundation. So we obviously have, like I said, community foundations, corporate foundations, United Ways are members of FPN. So nonprofit organizations on their own, if you're not a grant maker, unfortunately, you can't be a member of FPN at this time, but we do partner a lot with other, statewide nonprofit organizations to, do convenings and work and learn from each other. So you can always partner with us and we can work together to talk about issues that are important that funders need to know about or to learn from. But yeah, that's how, if you are a funder, you can be a family foundation as well to be part of FPN. But you have to be grant makers in order to be part of the network.
Got it. And finish up by talking about 2022. What's going to be the big action this year?
Well, I'm sure, like many of you right now, we're in the midst of trying to hurdle through the newest surge in Omicron across the pandemic. So that's proving to be quite difficult, but I'm optimistic in terms of where we're headed. We have our annual meeting, our summit that we have every year. It will be in person. We plan to still do it safely in Orlando, and that will be February 16th through the 18th. We're planning on doing some more regional convenings across the state, specific to regional issues, to make sure that our funders have a place to convene to talk about the things that matter to them. We have continued partnerships with the Kresge Foundation, the Helix Education Foundation, doing some work on the local college access network, which I'm really, really proud of, and working with FCAN as well. So really, really great things on the horizon. This is I think I'm a year and 2 months into my role as president and CEO. So I don't think I can say that I'm new anymore in my role, but I still think there's a lot of energy and exciting things to come in the new year. And I'm looking forward to some sense of normalcy when we can, and to meet in person. This is great that we can connect in this way, Joe, but it will be nice to have more in-person meetings, to have those kind of real, true, authentic connections. So I'm looking forward to more of that in 2022, when it's safe to do so.
When it's safe to do so. Awesome. Ashley Dietz, President and CEO of Florida Philanthropic Network. Thanks for sharing what's going on with what you're doing and all the people you're serving.
Thank you so much.